I've been on such a kick lately of watching Stephen King movies. Been having so much fun going back, watching and rewatching some movies based on works by Stephen King. So today let's talk about 10 of his movies that I recommend. Now this is not a top 10 list, absolutely not. It's just a list of some movies I want to talk about. So welcome to the Cobwebs channel, everybody. My name is Daniel, and let's get started. So this is based on a 1984 novel that King actually wrote under the pseudonym Richard Bachman. But of course, it became known later that he actually wrote it, and sales for it absolutely skyrocketed. But the movie is directed by Tom Holland, and I love Tom Holland because he wrote and directed Fright Night, he directed Child's Play, he wrote Psycho 2, really enjoy Thinner. And it really shows Stephen King's influences when it comes to EC Comics. It totally feels like a Tales from the Crypt type story because it's about a guy who's not a good guy. This is a lawyer who gets paid top dollar to defend bad people. At the beginning of the movie, he's literally defending a guilty member of the mafia and gets him off. And the reason he's going through everything in this movie is because he hits a woman with his car while his wife is doing stuff on him. So he's just kind of doing bad, irresponsible stuff all over the place. So it's about a bad guy getting into a bad situation, trying desperately to get out of it. And it's entertaining. Robert John Burke is in the lead. He does a good job being over the top, as the tone of this movie absolutely demands him to do. And he's sufficiently unlikable while still being sympathetic while he's going through this stuff, which is really what you need if you're going to make a movie centered around of his former self. They do a great job. There's a lot of other wild, gnarly effects all through this. Now, Thinner is ridiculous. It is over the top. It is tonally goofy, but I think it's fun, and I really like it.
Sometimes they come back.
Sometimes they come back. From 1991. Desperate for a job to help support his family, Jim Norman takes a position teaching high school in the town where his brother was murdered in front of him by teenage bullies 27 years ago. The teens who committed the crime are long dead, but now the kids in Jim's new class keep dying and being replaced by new students who look like the deceased gang members. So this is based on a 1974 short story that first appeared in the magazine Cavalier, but was later collected in King's 1978 collection, Night Shift. And it was made for TV, and this is another little-known King adaptation that was directed by a kind of iconic director. This is directed by Tom McLaughlin, who directed Jason Lives, Friday the 13th 6, a lot of people's favorite Friday the 13th movie. And this was just classic, typical, cozy Stephen King kind of stuff. I really love the atmosphere of this film, supposedly taking place in rural New England, but was actually filmed in Missouri, not too far away from me. So watching this movie kind of feels like home, because it is. It's got a solid cast, including Tom Matheson as the typical academic middle-aged family man, the kind of protagonist that a lot of Stephen King stuff centers around. Brooke Adams as his wife, great to see her. And Robert Russler as the lead of the undead gang, who you know from Vamp and Nightmare on Elm Street 2. The tone of this is a little bit odd, as all the stuff centered around a protagonist is very serious, dealing with grief, dealing with can you move on from traumatic incidents that happened in your childhood. But a lot of the horror of it is fairly goofy. You got some goofy makeup and prosthetics on our undead gang to make them look super spooky, and they definitely camp it up with some one-liners throughout the film and such like that, but it works for me enough. This is exactly the kind of cozy King that I enjoy watching.
Gerald?
What?
Gerald?
Gerald's Game from 2017. When her husband's sex game goes wrong and results in his unexpected death, Jesse, who is handcuffed to the bed in a remote lake house, faces warped visions, dark secrets, and a dire choice. Gerald's Game is based on King's 1992 novel of the same name, and it was long considered unfilmable because it is about a woman all alone, handcuffed to a bedpost, only accompanied by her dead husband lying on the ground. But Mike Flanagan took the challenge and decided to make this into a movie. It went straight to Netflix. And Mike Flanagan might be my favorite horror filmmaker working right now. I am such a huge fan of him. He creates such powerful, emotional horror horror stories, and Gerald's Game is a really good example of that. It is such a classic survival movie, and that's why I think it makes sense that this can work as a film, because there are a lot of movies that have worked being about somebody alone in a horrible situation, doing anything they can to survive. That's very much what you get here. You get harrowing flashbacks to her past, learning more about her character as she goes through this. A cast full of Mike Flanagan regulars. He likes to work with the same people a lot, including Carla Gugino, Bruce Greenwood, Henry Thomas, Kate Siegel, Mike Flanagan's actual wife. It's very intense. It's got one of the most horrific gore moments I've ever seen in my life. It's harrowing. It's interesting. It's got an incredibly creepy moment that got under my skin so bad. The only problem with it is it goes on too long. And I mean just a little bit, like 5 to 10 minutes. You get such a great ending in this movie, and it keeps going. It offers more explanation, more closure, and it sours some of what came before. That bums me out a little bit. I wish Flanagan had known just to cut it off where it hit the hardest, but it's not that big a deal. I still love Mike Flanagan. This is a really good movie of his.
Best places here infested.
That might be the understatement of the year. Graveyard Shift.
Graveyard Shift from 1990 is about a drifter who wanders into a small town in Maine and seeks a job at a large textile mill. He's hired to work the graveyard shift, and along with few others is charged with cleaning out their basement. Based on a 1970 short story that was also first in Cavalier magazine and was also later collected in Night Shift. And I just watched this for the first time. I've been meaning to see it for a long time, but Kino Lorber just put it out on a Blu-ray. Really nice Blu-ray. It looks absolutely beautiful on this. And this just feels like a classic 80s horror film. Yes, it came out in 1990, but it was made in the 80s, and I just love the feel of horror movies from this time period. David Andrews plays our fairly generic main character, Drifter, who comes into town, but I think he's likable enough. I think he does a good job. I like the cast in this, including Brad Dourif in a supporting role as an exterminator, and Brad Dourif hams it up big, and he is so entertaining in this. And I have to shout out Stephen Macht as the boss of this mill, using the thickest, most crazy New England Maine accent I've ever heard in my life. It is so entertaining.
We're like shrimp in an all-you-can-eat salad bar, and that thing ain't stopping till it's full.
But the star of the film is definitely the setting, the atmosphere. I love the mill it takes place in. Feels like a haunted house kind of atmosphere. It's broken down. They're trying to reopen it. There are rats everywhere. Rats are a very important source of the horror in this. And as they go deeper and deeper into this mill, find like unexplored caverns leading to a graveyard. It's a fun exploration type horror movie that I really enjoy. But it's not just rats. It's not just a dirty, filthy setting. It is a monster that they encounter down in there. And I'm not going to spoil what the monster is like. I kind of expected just a giant rat, but it's a little more than that, and it looks phenomenal. I mean, the practical effects are fantastic. No, it's not great. It's not a classic. Stephen King actually really disliked this movie. He just called it a quick exploitation picture, maybe his least favorite of all the movies based on his works, but I don't think it deserves that at all. I think it is fun, entertaining, sloppily written at times, but the cast, the setting, more than make up for it.
What's going on?
It's death.
Something in the mist! Shut the doors! Shut the doors!
The Mist from 2007. After a violent storm, a dense cloud of mist envelopes a small Maine town, trapping David and his 5-year-old son in a local grocery store with the other residents. They soon discovered that the mist conceals deadly horrors that threaten their lives and sanity. So this is based on the 1980 novella, and an edited version of it later appeared in King's short story collection Skeleton Crew. And it was directed by Frank Darabont, came out in 2007. I was a teenager back then, and I went to see this in theaters with my dad, and it burned into my brain. This was such a cool but deeply disturbing, horrific experience for me that I've never forgotten. But I never rewatched this movie until just recently. I got up the courage to check out The Mist again, and it's really that ending, right? I wouldn't dream of spoiling the ending for anybody, so don't worry, but the ending is truly one of the most horrific, disturbing, upsetting endings that's ever been done on film. And I praise it because it is so memorable. Like, you will never forget it. I remembered it clear as day. I remembered a lot of this movie. I was actually surprised because it's been almost 20 years since I had seen it. But it's the kind of ending that makes me sick to my stomach. It makes it a hard watch. The cast here is so good. I love Thomas Jane and Laurie Holden as our true leads of the movie. Toby Jones is great as the kind of guy, just based on how he looks, you wouldn't expect to really step up in this situation, but he does. But it's also Marcia Gay Harden, who also makes this movie hard to watch as a crazy religious zealot who becomes a cult leader within this grocery store and becomes also a threat, much like the monsters outside are. This is really about monsters, and it is a cosmic horror movie in some amazing ways. Like, there's this one scene of a giant monster walking by that feels like one of the greatest examples of true, unspeakable Lovecraftian cosmic horror that I've ever seen in my life. But it is that, but it's really about the horrors of humanity and how we can't work together when we're faced with a horrible situation. Because this movie so clearly shows that, like, we could work together for a better situation, but we won't. And it's so frustrating, but it's a harrowing experience. The CGI is super dated, and that is a shame. It does cut back on the realism a little bit, but there are some shots that are pretty good. The monster designs are still good. They are horrifying. And this movie just so clearly communicates a bleak, miserable, hopeless situation like almost nothing else I've ever seen.
I've always wanted to know what hell was like. Now you will know.
The Night Flier from 1997. A cynical tabloid journalist hunts down the story of the Night Flier, believed to be a vampire that travels by night on a plane and lands at secluded airfields and murders the local residents. This is based on a short story first published in the 1988 anthology Prime Evil, and then in King's own short story collection, Nightmares and Dreamscapes. And the thing that really sucks about the Night Flier is it's so unavailable. It has long been out of print on physical media. I mean, you really can't get a hold of it for any kind of decent price. It's not officially available on streaming, but you can watch it here on YouTube, and the quality is actually pretty good. That is how I watched it, and it's so worth watching. It first premiered on HBO, but it feels better than just a TV movie. I love Miguel Ferrer as the lead character, an incredibly dirty tabloid journalist who doesn't care about the truth at all, and he's such an unlikable guy, but always really interesting. I mean, he's the better version of the lead in Thinner. Unlikable guy, but this is the more interesting version for sure. You've got great atmosphere at all these almost abandoned airfields where this Night Flier comes in, and the look of the vampire is amazing. Like, it is such an iconic, unique, horrific, monstrous design for a vampire, but it's not just a feral beast, right? It's not like some vampire movies, they basically treat vampires like zombies who just happen to drink blood instead of eat flesh, but this is a thinking, speaking, intelligent creature like I like vampires to be, but still with a monstrous design. That's kind of like the best of all worlds for me. Such a good version of it. I truly hope the Night Flier becomes more available one day, but it's available to watch, and I can't recommend it enough.
You wouldn't happen to remember if my aunt had a wind-up toy monkey at the yard sale? It's back.
The Monkey from 2025. When twin brothers find a mysterious wind-up monkey, a series of outrageous deaths literally tear their family apart. 25 years later, the monkey begins a new killing spree, forcing the estranged brothers to confront the cursed toy. Based on a 1980 short story published in Gallery magazine, but was then significantly revised and published in King's collection Skeleton Crew, the most recent Stephen King movie to come out, and this is the film that I went to see in theaters opening night and kicked off my run of watching a whole bunch of other Stephen King movies, because this film so much put me in the mood. And this is one of those movies that the more I sit on it, the more I think about it, the more I really like it. And I think even if I reviewed it right after I had watched it, I didn't end up doing that, I wouldn't be as positive as I am now. Just, it keeps growing in my estimation. I like it so much. It is so tonally inconsistent. And I'm one of those people that does not think that is necessarily always a bad thing. I think movies can pull that off well, jerk your audience around into feeling different ways about different scenes, because this is a comedy. I mean, this is a horror comedy. And what's really weird about that is it's directed by Oz Perkins, who previously made movies like The Black Coat's Daughter and last year's Longlegs. Really, really bleak, serious films. And he tonally changed things up so much, but there's still moments of like rich family commentary and deep relationships that are very interesting. There's some deep emotions felt in this, while still having some of the most bonkers, wacky kill sequences you've ever seen in your life. The monkey curses situations to become like Final Destination, like killing sequences. They're hilarious, they're fun, they're gross, they're so much fun. And even the look of the monkey is fantastic here. I just love it. My best explanation of the tone of this movie is the way Eli Roth talks about cabin fever. Eli Roth says that when he made Cabin Fever, he purposefully put just a lot of weird, wacky, almost nonsensical stuff into the movie for the purpose of being fun for a midnight movie audience. He made that movie to be a midnight movie for horror fans to gather, to laugh, to gasp, to be like, what the heck is this? What am I watching? And just have a really raucous good time. That's what The Monkey is like. It's just such an offbeat film with all of these weird things thrown in where you're like, I don't know why that's there, but it's so bizarre. And you just laugh, you have a good time. And I truly hope this becomes like a big midnight movie for horror fan screenings, because if it doesn't, that's a big missed opportunity. Theo James is also really good in the lead. He's like a generic pretty boy actor that I'm used to from Divergent, which is a movie I don't like, and I didn't particularly like him in it. But now that he's older and he's using an American accent in this movie, he reminds me a lot of Tom Selleck. He feels like a new Tom Selleck, and I think like they've got to get this guy into some like direct-to-video action dad movies. Or not direct-to-video, theatrical too, but that's just what I was thinking. He'd be so good in that, and I would love to see that. He gets to play dual roles in here as two twin brothers, really makes them both distinct and interesting. The Monkey is so fun and could be a new midnight movie classic.
Now there's a new name for terror. Cujo.
Cujo from 1983, about a mother and her son who are trapped in a broken down car and attacked by a rabid giant dog named Cujo. Based on the 1981 novel of the same name. So I admit I very recently talked about this movie on another list I did on just suspenseful films, but my recent rewatch of this movie on this new 4K was so good, I kind of just had to talk about it again, especially if I'm doing a Stephen King list. Cujo is so awesome. I really enjoyed it back in the day when I saw it, but my rewatch, it grew in my estimation so much. I love Dee Wallace in the lead role, in a complicated role about a mother of a wonderful son. She's got a great husband, but she's cheating on him, which is such an interesting source of tension from the beginning of the movie and puts her in such like a moral gray area where you're not totally sure how you feel about her. So the family dynamic stuff is great in this movie. It really captivates me. But the horror, the suspense, once they are stuck in this car, I mean, it's the better version of Gerald's Game, because they're both about a woman trapped in one situation trying to survive. But this is definitely the more harrowing version. And she's with her son here, who gives such an incredible child performance. Just absolutely blew me away. And even though dogs are cute, they're wonderful, we all love dogs, this movie is really good at making Cujo horrifying. Just how rabid and mangy they make him. He feels like such a threat. And every time they decide to like inch out of the car to try to get a weapon or try to get to the house or do something to get out of here, like that thing is right there, and it feels like a velociraptor in Jurassic Park. You're like, I would definitely die if this came near me, so like I've got to do something right now. It's such a great source of suspense. It's got classic Stephen King atmosphere, beautifully shot. The score is just gorgeous. I love Cujo.
Start her up.
Christine from 1983. Nerdy high schooler Arnie falls for Christine, a rusty 1958 Plymouth Fury, and becomes obsessed with restoring the classic automobile to her former glory. Based on the 1983 novel of the same name, yes, also 1983, this thing came out 8 months after the book came out. That's a crazy turnaround. But this is directed by John Carpenter, and John Carpenter is my favorite director of all time, and Christine is such a great example of why. Something interesting about this is this was very much a job for hire for Carpenter. He was kind of in director jail after The Thing came out and it was such a bomb. He did this for money because they would hire him to do it. He wasn't particularly passionate about the material. And even Stephen King didn't end up liking the movie that much. He thought it was kind of boring. But it's an example of why Carpenter was such an incredible director in the 80s. His heart wasn't totally in this, but he still made an absolute classic. And it's amazing to me that it feels so much like a Carpenter movie and so much like a classic Stephen King kind of thing. Like it really melds those two tones and atmospheres and feels so perfectly. And I love that it feels like an 80s movie, but it's still got such a 1950s feel too, with 50s music. And as Arnie starts changing, as Christine is changing him into something more evil, he feels like he's becoming more and more like an evil version of James Dean, a rebel without a cause or something. Carpenter's score here is amazing, one of his greatest. The cinematography by Donald Morgan is gorgeous. So much beautiful lighting in here, particularly coming from Christine's headlights or when Christine is on fire. Christine is such a great object of terror in this. When you didn't think a haunted car movie could be that, Christine pulls it off. Stephen King was really into like haunted object stories. I mean, we just talked about the monkey. He even had a haunted laundry press in The Mangler. That's a crazy movie, but actually pretty entertaining. But Christine, one of the greatest examples of this. Changed the story somewhat because in the story it's literally haunted by something. Here it just seems to be a car that is sentient in a really creepy way. Christine rules. It is awesome. It is so entertaining. I love it.
I don't know about magic. I always called it The Shining.
Dr. Sleep from 2019, the sequel to The Shining, in which Dan Torrance is still scarred by the trauma he endured at the Overlook Hotel. And now he faces the ghosts of his past when he meets Arba, a courageous teen who desperately needs his help and possesses the Shine. Based on the 2013 novel that was King's sequel to his book, The Shining, Dr. Sleep, you never would have thought that there could be a good sequel to Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. I mean, it's such a massive, legendary classic. And here, Mike Flanagan, once again, we're coming back to Mike Flanagan, came in and made a sequel that is even better than the original. To me, not to most people. I totally acknowledge that. And that's not because I don't love The Shining. I do love it. I think it's great. But I think why Dr. Sleep works even better for me is it is such a more emotional and deeply profound story to me. Because Stanley Kubrick is famously a very cold filmmaker, and Mike Flanagan is anything but. And Dr. Sleep is such a beautiful movie about a broken man haunted by his past, played so well by Ewan McGregor, who is dealing with his past, with legacy, with dark memories of his father, and by his ability to shine and seeing ghosts and having psychic visions. And this movie gets way more into the weeds about the Shine, that ability, than Kubrick's film did. The Shining, it doesn't have very much to do with that. It kind of skips over it a little bit. This movie gets much deeper into that and even features a villain played by Rebecca Ferguson, Rose the Hat. That's like one of the greatest horror villains of the modern era. She is so interesting and charismatic, but horrifying. She has a whole group of basically like life force vampires that are killing people horrifically. It is scary. This is still a dark and creepy and horrifying movie at times, while still being beautiful and emotional in ways that just blow me away. And I'll also say I'm really talking about the director's cut, because I saw the theatrical cut when it first came out. I thought it was good. I thought it felt a little overly long at 2.5 hours, but then I saw the director's cut, which is 3 hours. And it fixed everything for me. It became a perfect movie for me. It was an incredible experience. And that just goes to show you that like the pacing of the movie has basically nothing to do with the runtime. It is all about how consistently interested and engaged you are. And the director's cut ramped that way up for me. So it's kind of a miracle movie in that it fully satisfied Stephen King, unlike Kubrick's The Shining, which he hated. He even said that this kind of redeemed Kubrick's The Shining for him, because this also pays great homage to that film visually with the Overlook Hotel and with recastings of Danny's parents, which they did such a good job with. The actors who play his parents are so good. It just goes to show that the CGI deep faking thing that is plaguing franchises right now, recreating deceased actors or just the younger versions of actors, it's awful. I hate it. And all you really need to do is cast good people that can pull that off. That is what Mike Flanagan did here. This is one of my favorite horror sequels of all time and absolutely one of my favorite Stephen King movies. Before I go, I just want to give a huge thank you to my patrons who truly keep this channel going the way it is. I appreciate you all so much, with a special shout out to Bobby Bolton, Diana W, and Dulce Green. You guys are the best. So that's my list, but what are some other Stephen King adaptations that you would recommend? Maybe some lesser known ones. Let me know down in the comments below. And if you want to hang out with me more, you can click this video or this playlist of a bunch of other of my recommendations. And if you did enjoy this, you can give a like and a subscribe. I'd certainly appreciate it. So thank you all so much. Don't forget to enjoy yourself today, have some fun, and I'll see you next time.